Thank you for joining us on the Spotlight in Observance of Black History Month. I'm Wetland Douglas. I'm an account executive here at Brown & Brown in our Seattle office. My co-host is Stephanie Gordon, and she works in critical service in Atlanta, Georgia. We're so honored to share this platform with our special guest, filmmaker Keith Beauchamp, who is the producer and co-writer of the Till movie, based on the true story of Mamie Till Mobley, and the mother of Emmett Till, whose murder led to a heightened sense of activism and resistance that profoundly shaped the civil rights movement.
Thank you so much, and welcome, Keith. Thank you for joining us. You're so happy to have you here today. And just thank you for joining us to share your remarkable story and just to tell us right now what led to you embarking upon this unique journey.
Well, my journey with Emmett Till started when I was just 10 years old. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I was in my parents' study going through old vintage magazines that they kept over the years when I came across an old Jet magazine that told the story of Emmett Till. There I was, thumbing through the pages, and I come across this angelic face of this young little boy, sort of a mirror image of myself at that time. And then on the other side of this page, there's this horrific face of this monster. I could not wrap my head around to what I was exactly looking at. And just so happened, my parents were walking by the study and my mother looked in on me and she saw me sitting down with my mouth open, looking at the pages of this Jet magazine. So she looked over my shoulder and she saw that I discovered the photograph of Emmett Till, and she called my father in, and they both looked at each other and said, it's time to tell him the story. But throughout my life, the name Emmett Till kept resurfacing. When I got into high school, I was interracially dating. And the first thing my parents would tell me before I left the house at night was, don't let what happened to Emmett Till happen to you. So it became an educational tool to teach me about the racism that still exists in this country today. But it wasn't until 2 weeks before my high school graduation where I would have to say I had my real run-in encounter with racism. And that was when I was assaulted by an undercover police officer for dancing with a white classmate of mine at a pre-graduation party. And so that's what spurred me into wanting to fight injustice. But I felt the only way that could be possible if I became a part of a system to fight against this kind of injustice. So I began to study criminal justice at Southern University of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, in hopes of becoming a civil rights attorney. But towards my junior year of college, I was introduced to filmmaking by my best friend who had moved to New York City to work with his sister film production company. So I went back, told my parents about the things that I was learning from him. And like best friends, you stick together. So I asked my parents to allow me to sit out a semester, that if things didn't work out, I would go back and finish undergrad and go to law school as planned. But it was at a company meeting I was asked if there was a story that I would want to tell, what would that story be? And of course, the name of Emmett Till came in mind. And that's the cusp of how my journey actually started. But when I made the decision to tell the story of Emmett Till, I knew it could not be told without Mother Mobley. Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley, to whom I call Mother Mobley, Emmett Till's mother. I knew that I could not be successful without having her and the family involved. So what I did immediately after I made that decision, I decided that I would reach out to Emmett Till's mother. By this time, I had not known what her life had been like since the death of her son. I have not read much about her over the years because my interest wasn't there just yet. But as I went online, not the same as how we go online today, and I can remember sitting in the office and saying to myself, I needed to reach out to the late Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley because there's no way I would move forward without having her blessings and the family's blessings to tell the story. And so I went online and did some research. I found an Emmett Till Foundation webpage, and it had the number of the late Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley on it. And so I just took the number, I wrote it down, and I picked up the phone and I gave her a call. And as soon as she picked up the phone, I could tell you, I hung up in her face. I was scared. I did not understand what state of mind she could possibly be in. I did not want to open up old wounds, and that was foremost in my mind. And so I fussed at myself after hanging up, and I gathered myself, my composure, and said, I need to call her again. And so I called back. As soon as she picked up the phone, I immediately apologized to her for hanging up in her face. And then she asked me, why did I hang up? And I guess she could sense that I was nervous. And she just told me, baby, just calm down and talk to me. And so I told her about my encounter with Emmett, just as I told you all today, from beginning to end, and how much Emmett was a big part of my life growing up, and that I wanted in some way to help her get justice for him, if there was a possibility. And I did not meet her face to face until 2 weeks before Christmas in 1996. And thinking about the journey and looking at everything in hindsight, and hearing Mother Mobley tell how she felt when we first met, she described our relationship and that meeting for the first time as being sort of like a love affair. And that was because I believe she knew everything about me, and she knew what my heart felt. And for me, she filled the void of me just losing my grandmother at that time. And we kind of leaned on each other. And so through Mother Mobley, I was inspired to continue her legacy by sharing the story of Emmett Till in hopes of raising the consciousness of those who do not know the story. And so that journey between us was 8.5 years. She became a close friend and a mentor of mine. She was my inspiration in doing the work that I do. I can honestly tell you, if not for Mother Mobley and her courageous decisions, her actions of 1955, and of course the legacy of her son, Emmett Lewis Till, there would be no Keith Beauchamp, filmmaker, today.
Wow. That's incredible. I think it's interesting when you have a biopic and somebody that really has the connection that you have to the subject matter. And I think as we were watching the film, there was definitely areas that you could just feel the intimacy in it. One of the things that Stephanie and I talked about was a lot of the shots were really close up, and it kind of leaned to being a really intimate feeling, and not necessarily like you're side, but you were going right along with her. And I don't know if that was because of the relationship that you guys had, but it was something that I noticed in it that I really spoke to me, because I don't think I see that a lot. So yes, and just hearing your story kind of makes it all a little bit more.
Until the movie came out of a 29-year effort from myself to tell the story. Emmett Till's mother, in 1955 and 56, she had 2 movie deals in place, but the films were never pursued or ever produced because of the times, of course, of the 50s and the late 60s. So for 47 years, Mother Mobley had not only tried to keep Emmett's name out in the forefront and to fight for justice for him, she also tried to get her story on the big screen. This is what she wanted. So out of the frustration of not being able to produce his film, a film until in the early 90s, because I wrote a screenplay that was actually optioned off by producers who worked with Showtime, and they shelved the project and they had an option agreement with it. And I had no control of that script for 3 or so years. And so during that time, I was also traveling back and forth throughout the Mississippi Delta, finding eyewitnesses and new evidence in the case. And Mother Mobley knew all the stuff that I was doing. And so she is the one who actually encouraged me to produce the documentary, because she saw the struggle I was having trying to produce the feature film. And it's a blessing to have someone like that in your life giving you direction, because when we made this decision to pursue the documentary, it ultimately led to the reopening of the case in 2004, something that we both had hoped would happen. It was all a blessing in disguise. The unfortunate part of that journey and reaching this goal that Mother Mobley wanted us to reach is that she passed away 1 year before it actually happened.
I would just say, as I watched the movie, I've watched 3 times now, and I feel each time the same way. As a single mother to a son myself, it just made me really relate beyond what I could have ever imagined to what Mamie Till could have possibly felt. Of course, I would never know, and I hope I never know. But I could just almost feel, as Wetland stated, the intimacies, perhaps from the numerous accounts that she shared with you directly. And diving into the movie just a bit, in particular, I would say when I was around the same, I think we're the same age. When I was around that same age, I recall seeing the magazine image as well from, I think, Jet magazine, and had questions and concerns because I had never seen the story of Emmett Till myself as a child. But one thing that I noticed in the movie, for the first time, I think I was able to fully absorb the fact that Emmett was just a 14-year-old child and not a 14-year-old little man. I know that his sartorial style of dress was very impeccable, because Mamie Till was very much a classy woman, and her child represented that same dynamic. So was it very intentional for us to see through various scenes, even the decor of his bedroom, that he was really just a child, that this heinous act happened to a child? And not that it would be excusable for it to be an adult, but really, when you think about having a 14-year-old little boy, it just takes us to another profound level of understanding as to how heinous this crime was. Was there any intentionality there?
Absolutely. I mean, it was very important to myself and our director that we portrayed Emmett in the way that he was. He was a 14-year-old child. He's no different than any other 14-year-old. But what people need to understand about Emmett is the fact that he was a child of the times. He grew up in the 50s in Chicago, Illinois. His mother was working middle class, right? And what was amazing about their lifestyle was the fact that they had a television set. Many people in the 50s did not have television, let alone a floor model television that Emmett Till had and had access to. 55 was sort of the revolution of television in many ways. This is when you had all the popular sitcoms to come out. And Emmett, or should I say, television was to Emmett as gaming systems are to young people today. So when you saw Emmett in the film, there was things that we had to include because Emmett was known to emulate television. Again, this is his gaming system.
Mm-hmm.
So the first scene, when you see Till watching television, he's imitating the commercial
Mm-hmm.
that he's watching. And this is something Mother Mobley would talk to me about a lot of times because at an early age of 2 years old, Emmett was stricken with polio, which left him with a stutter. But she said when he would emulate television or these commercials, she would never hear a stutter. And so that scene was to represent that relationship and what Mother Mobley would talk to me about in terms of his speech impediment. But telling the story of Till on the big screen, we only had this small window of time to tell his story. He was known as a prankster. He was known as a person who had to be at the center of attention. The way his mother would put it, he was a Leo. So anybody knows Leos, hey, he had to be at the center of attention. But his favorite comic duo was Abbott and Costello, which is why in the scene in the cotton field, we have him emulating an episode of Abbott and Costello, The Mummy. And so we tried as quick as we could to tell or to sum up the traits of Emmett Till enough for people to understand who he was.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah. And it's interesting hearing the little stories behind it because I was kind of mentioned this before, but I actually filmed before these conversations started because I first started learning about Emmett Till when I was in middle school, so around his age, so very young, and it's always been a very painful subject matter for me, and so I tend to avoid particularly movies around him just because and it's hard, it's a lot of trauma. But something that I was really thankful that Stephanie pushed us to watch this movie and have this conversation because watching the movie, one of the first thing I noticed in that opening scene when they're in the car was how bright it was. I think about other films that are done around that time or what have you. And I know, a lot of neon colors were really big, but there was something the only word I have is bright and light about the cinematography of the film. And I remember thinking when he was in the car and also just pieces of like we were talking about with him and seeing his childlikeness and being able to see the lightness and the love of their relationship and like who he actually was. Because when we learn about him, we don't learn really about him as a boy and as a person. We just learn about the story. And so I wasn't sure if the brightness piece, the cinematographer, if that was a choice or if that was just how they styled it. And I wasn't sure if it was just because it was a contrast to like the somber subject matter to kind of uplift it. But I just, right when I saw it open, I was like, whoa, this is different.
I think one of the biggest things why it captured your attention so much as well is that normally when you see stories of the 50s, when you're talking about the Black experience, we never see a middle class on screen. That's what's different from this film than all the others. You can go through the list of films throughout history. You have never seen a film of a Black woman, middle-class woman of the 50s. You just haven't seen it. This is at the cusp of upward mobility for African Americans in this country. And we just never been able to see ourselves in that way. And that's why I personally was drawn so much to it, this story as well, putting it on a big screen. And it's our director and our cinematographer who got together to talk about the shots that would be used, as well as the colors of the clothing and things of that nature, and just the lighting in general. All, you know, it's a wonderful thing when you have a team to come together and we all see the same thing, you know, and we all want to put our 110% in to make sure that we produced a very respectful film. Now, I understand there were many, and that was one of the biggest challenges with Till. I had never really thought that I would encounter it, because I assumed that people was aware of my track record and the work that I've done for many, many years. But I do have to remind myself that there's a new generation out here who don't know the Keith Beauchamp name, who probably have never seen any of my catalog of films before. And so it seemed as though every generation has a certain tolerance of what they actually visually see on screen when it comes to the Black experience. So my whole time producing the film was trying to figure out how we got around that conversation, because all I ever wanted to do was to resurrect my mentor, so that the public, so that the masses could understand the great woman that I knew, the woman who inspired me to do the work that I do. Because it was my hope that if we were successful in doing it, that same energy, that same inspiration that I got out of meeting her, that those who view this film would get that too. But having the experience that I have, learning the true story of Emmett Till through Mother Mobley, I now understand that it happens. And we have to be aware when we see the slaughter of Black and brown people on the streets of America, whether it's at the hands of those who are sworn in to protect us, or whether it's at the hands of white supremacists, Emmett Till and these cases are the Emmett Tills of today. They're one and the same. And these are the things that Mother Mobley was trying to instill in me before she passed away. She was trying to instill that in all of us, to understand clearly the enemy that we will be fighting, and how this enemy, if gone unchecked, could rise once again. And so it's through the story of Emmett Till, I believe Mother Mobley had the blueprint to man's liberation when it comes to racial progression in this country. I'm long-winded, and
no, this is good.
No,
I absolutely agree with you, Keith, regarding that perspective. And I just find this movie so endearing to me, because for the first time, as you stated, we get to truly see and feel the emotions of what a mother goes through. And as you stated, we have modern day mothers going through the same thing. I just watched the Tyree Nichols funeral just last week. His grandmother lives here in Atlanta, and seeing her on the local news just over the weekend is heart-wrenching. How important for you was it to show, I'm going to speak specifically to a scene, to focus on the scene where Mamie Till just felt this nudging or this intuition that something wasn't right about Emmett's travel to the South? I mean, she tried to prep him on how to behave and get him to think the way that he needed to think. But again, we're talking to a child at this time. And so did she ever express to you perhaps that maybe she could have done more? I mean, as a parent, we often think, well, maybe I failed my child in this way, but she, I think, did the best that she could. She did give him the speech. You know, there's a different speech for today that we have to give, but she gave him the speech of that time. And could you speak to us about that a little bit?
Yes, Stephanie, that's a good question. And you caught on to it, Stephanie, by the way. You see it in Untold, and the Untold Story of Emmett Lewis Till, and you see it in Till as well. Mother Mobley, what a lot of people don't know, was clairvoyant. She did have a premonition about what could possibly happen to Emmett Till if he is sent down to Mississippi. But in her mind, she didn't know, in fact, that something deadly was going to happen in the way that it happened. And she was fighting this tug of war of what it is to be Black in America and Black culture. And what I mean about that is, you're from the South. I'm from the South. I know Stephanie's from the South.
Yeah.
Many of us from the South understand Southern culture. What I mean by that is that Emmett really didn't have a choice but to go, because he was reaching puberty, and most people and Black young boys who are raised, whether it's down South or up South, we call it, many at a certain point of their lives, right when puberty hit, are sent down to the Deep South to experience the culture. And so sending Emmett to the Deep South at a time of 14 years old, that was sort of his rites of passage. And so the tug of war of him holding him back, she would be holding him back from becoming a man. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so that's why it's so important for us to have these discussions to understand why certain decisions were made, in particular in this case. Emmett leaned on his grandmother a lot as well. He was a pushover with her. She was the matriarch of the family, and so although Mrs. Of course, Mamie Till Mobley did not want him to go, he still had his grandmother supporting him and wanting him to go to Mississippi. Again, we're fighting cultural, our culture in that sense. And so when Emmett actually gets on the train in real life, Mother Mobley actually collapses at the train station, and she is not able to walk until she gets word later on in the week that he is missing. And so she was touched, if you want to call it that, as well as Emmett's great uncle, Moses Wright. He actually saw the death of Emmett Till take place 10 years before it actually happened. And so she leaned on her faith strongly. She was a member of Kojic Church. Her mother herself was involved with founding Kojic churches from the Deep South of Mississippi all the way up to Chicago. So they were church-thumping people and very faithful and God-fearing people, because it's only through faith that anyone could have endured so much pain like she had and be able to deal with it in the manner that she did. Between the death of her son in 1955 and towards the trial, and through the trial of 1955, I should say, the murder trial, that's all happening within 1 month. I want you to put that in perspective. A mother who is 33 years old becomes an unintentional activist in the midst of fighting for justice for her son, all within a month span. You can't even get a parking ticket at times fixed in a month. Yeah. Right? This is how profound she was. And this is why she knew that Emmett was here for a higher cause. She will always talk to me about those visions that she received. She would talk about these visions. Even at the back of the Untold Story of Emmett Till, the documentary, she talks about how God came to her and told her that Emmett wasn't hers, that he belongs to him. And he had left us for a greater cause. And of course, that greater cause was the mobilization of the modern day civil rights movement.
We weren't really sure, like while watching it, if it was just, a scene that was actually factual or something that was a creative liberty just to drive the story. But when he's with his cousins after the incident with Carolyn, and they're at the party by the car, and they mentioned that they chose not to tell Preacher about the incident with Carolyn. And I remember hearing that part because I don't think I ever heard it before. And I was just wondering, was that something that you guys chose to add into the film to drive the storyline, or is it something that actually happened that she told you about? And I have a follow-up after that too.
Well, the greatest thing with our writing team, myself, Michael Riley, and Chinoya Chiku, our director, we also had a resource working alongside of us, and that was Simeon Wright, the cousin of Emmett Till, who shared the bed or the bedroom with them in the case of our film at the time of the abduction in 1955. So he was involved with every process in terms of the making of this film, the structure of the film, and of course, the writing process. Mm-hmm. And so through Mr. Wright, who was our consulting producer on Till, we learned over the years that Emmett begged them not to tell Most Right what transpired because he would be sent home before his vacation is up. Wow. No one ever knew that these white supremacists would be so low as to going to someone's house and taking a child away. No one could ever conceive that at that time. And so this is why they kept it a secret, and they did not want to say anything because Emmett begged them not to.
It really was what happened when I was watching it. Made me think about first I thought, oh well, maybe if they would have told, he would have gotten out of there sooner, because in my understanding of the story, I had always thought that the incident happened at the store and then that night they came for him. I didn't know it was a few days later. So in watching it, I was thinking, oh, well, he could have gotten out. He wouldn't have had to happen. And again, it kind of speaks to that they were children making these decisions. But also it's when you actually sit and think about it, even if they would have told his uncle, it makes you think, it reminds me of the scene by the river when Mamie goes to speak to him, and she's talking about, you chose your family over mine. It's like, no matter what would have happened, whether he would have left or stayed, something terrible would have happened that night. Right. And it just makes you think, like, would it have been one of his cousins that were taken in his place? Because you can easily see how they would have thought they were, rather than trying to protect a child. That's right. It's being seen as like a deceiving thing, and potentially one of the cousins taking his place. And obviously what happened if where history would have gone if one of the cousins would have been taken. But it just kind of hit home that it didn't matter what he did. I mean, it never mattered what he did, yes, but it also didn't matter who it happened to. The way that the beliefs, the ability for people to just the unchecked racism and unchecked horror, something would have happened, and it would have led to more and more and more. And it kind of kind of speaking to your point about Mamie's vision from God, is like it kind of had to happen to him. And I don't say that lightly by any means, but it was like it had to happen to him because it had to happen to her so that she could take it further. And right. So yeah, when I heard that part, it was just kind of, it took me a while to kind of it was like it doesn't matter, but it also
and to add to your statement, because I've been so intricate to the case, the reopening of the case, the investigation, I do know that those men were not just coming for Emmett Till that night. They had planned to get all the kids that night. The problem is when they saw how big Emmett was and could not handle him, they felt they could not handle him. They just settled for the boy who did the talking.
Oh, wow.
So it was a great possibility that, we would have seen other kids taken that night.
Wow.
That's amazing, Keith. I never knew that. And the one thing that I find is just, this project is just so chock full of information that I think that we needed to know. I know that that's not on the big screen, but, it led to the questions, and which results in the answers from you being such a powerful source of this story being told. I think it's so important. I, again, watched this movie 3 times, and I felt the same way each time. How do we help projects like yours, like this one, make it to the point of acclaim? And I know that you're going to say, because you are who you are, that it's not about the awards.
Yeah.
But for me, it is. But for me, it is, because when you receive that kind of acknowledgement for projects that are speaking to our realities, they need to be out there and they need to be acclaimed on a broader platform, such as the Oscars. But I do thank you for doing this project, and I'm so grateful for all the awards that Danielle and Jalen and many others have received up to this point.
That's right.
Just what can we do? Because I know there's certain metrics that have to be met to become considered, but what can we do?
What can we do to support these films when they're made? Don't be so quick to cancel them, because now we're in the world of cancel culture. And so, but we knew that we were obligated to tell the story, because there's no other story that speaks more to this generation, political and racial climate, than the story of Emmett Till.
So, all very, very true. I think it kind of moving away from the movie itself, but the legacy. Something that I didn't realize until watching the film was how long anti-lynching bills have been trying to be established. And something that I don't know if you and Mamie talked about this, but how did she feel about she did, and that, in her lifetime, she didn't see this pass? And then I have a follow-up on that as well.
Well, Mother Mobley was a big ball of inspiration. I never saw her falter from what she wanted to achieve. She fought for 47 years until her last breath, trying to get justice for her son. I know this because I was on the phone with her an hour before she passed away. She foresaw and knew how far I would be taking her son's story. She knew that I was going to be the one to get the case reopened. She said it to me multiple times, many times, and to my parents before I even done it. My biggest challenge for myself was believing that it was actually me who she saw doing this and having patience. Through her, I understood how to have patience. Through her, I understood how to have faith. She always knew that Emmett would continue to have a profound impact on society. She always knew that. It's just hard for other people to understand because this was a story that was supposed to be forgotten.
Mm.
We were never supposed to learn about the story of Emmett Till. And it's because of Mother Mobley and her tenacity to continue to tell his story to the masses is why we're talking about Emmett today. And so Mother Mobley always understood the importance of this story and telling the story to the masses time and time again. She had never felt the need or felt defeated in any way whatsoever. I like to believe that she left this earth understanding that Emmett would continue to cause change, and that's what's been happening.
In thinking about the anti-lynching bill, I guess, how did it feel for you, knowing how long you've worked on this project and Mamie's relentless effort, to see that the bill was passed just a few short months before the movie came out? Because until after this, I didn't really realize serendipitous in a way to me. And so I don't know how you felt about it, just knowing how hard it took to get to this point. And then, at least I know there's still more work to be done, obviously, but
That's
just
right.
this win in this moment.
Well, one is the bill was actually the architect of the bill that started to push was Congressman Bobby Rush, who's been a major supporter of mine and Mrs. Mobley for a very long time. This was his project, his baby. Now, before the anti-lynching legislature was passed, there were many other things that was passed that's actually named off. I mean, not off, but named. How should I say this?
Inspired by.
That inspired by Emmett Till, and even named off of his named off of Emmett, right? In this ongoing struggle. First, it was the Civil Rights Cold Case Initiative, which was inspired by myself working with the FBI on other civil rights cold cases. Emmett Till case reopened in 2004. Behind the scenes, I was working closely with the FBI, and they asked me, is there other ways to pursue other cases? That sparked the Civil Rights Cold Case Initiative, which later becomes the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crimes Act, and it is signed into law by President Bush and reauthorized by President Obama when he gets into office. And so this law allows us to go back and revisit unsolved civil rights murder cases of our past to see if they warrant new investigations and possible prosecutions. It also allocates $10 million a year in support of this work. And so that was the first major law that, we all were excited about, because this is something that Mother Mobley had often talked about. This is what she wanted, because she felt so guilty in 1955 with the overwhelming response and attention that her son's case received, that she felt that it was taken away from all the other mothers who were suffering from the similar thing that would never have a platform like she had. So she always instilled in me and talked about the idea of not just fighting for Emmett, but to also recognize and fight for all those other mothers who lost their loved ones and families who lost their loved ones throughout the civil rights struggle. So we were able to do that. There were, schools renamed after Emmett Till. There's a huge tourism industry in the Delta of Mississippi that takes you around to all the Emmett Till sites. Emmett has changed history and law in many ways. Now we have the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill that was signed into law. Well, we're talking about an effort that has taken over 120 years and 200, about a little bit over 200 attempts.
Wow.
I feel that we're late to the game. I'm happy that it's passed, but we're also late to the game.
The one thing that I want to, in closing, I would like to ask twofold. Speaking again to the fact that after the Tyree Nichols video was released just a couple weeks, well, just over a week ago, I did watch. I was one of those people. I felt an obligation to watch the videos.
Right.
Just after that, as I said, people in my timeline, I saw people posting on your Facebook page, wow, this reminds me of Emmett Till. You know,
That's right.
it just is amazing the timing. They both, another comparison, they both had these images. Of course, Emmett's after death, Tyree's image of being in the hospital. Neither, they're so disfigured. Both young men are just disfigured and don't look anything like themselves. So he's been coined as the modern day Emmett Till for the horrible beating at the hands of law enforcement. So Keith, at this time, we're in 2023 now, and we're seeing murders comparable to what happened in 1955. Yes, at the hands of different people, our own. But what advice do you give to us, to our youth today? We see tons of advocacy, protesting, but beyond the protest, what do you suggest that we do? Because I feel that when anything I do, that's why I got into politics. We have to take action. What do you think are action steps that we can take in addition to advocacy? Because that is action. But what can we do moving forward? Whether it's supporting legislation, how do you feel we can best be used, all ages in our country today, all races? This is a challenge that we all must be a part of. What advice do you give to us as a whole?
I want people to understand that it's very important that, especially if you're a person of color, to understand your place in society. As I said earlier, no more as an individual can we sit back and allow injustices to take place in front of our faces without doing anything, standing idle by. The fight for freedom and human and civil rights in this country has always remained the same. The ills that we're fighting are all the same. It's just cosmetically is different. I want people to understand their history, which is very important to understand in order for us to move forward. Without having that historical backdrop and understanding how movements are actually started, we won't be able to collectively come together for a new movement for change now. And that's the problem that I am seeing, which is why I have to keep saying my heart has been on Emmett Till so much in telling his story. What they did in the 1950s and 60s, they did right. They won. We are beneficiaries to many of the great things that was won in the 1950s and 60s. Now we're sitting here complaining as we watch those, things that we benefited from suddenly dwindling away, whether it's voting rights or the ongoing slaughter that we're seeing on the streets of America of people not respecting us as human beings and violating our civil rights every day. So as individuals, I need people to take a stand and understand their position in life and do something about it. Act from what you have and where you're at. You may not have the platform that I have as being a filmmaker. You may work in a corporation, but there's ways that we all can actively be involved with this grand old working clock that I often speak about that is important to the liberation of our people. You cannot continue to go every year and watching the slaughter on the streets of America continue without raising your voice. Become a part of the solution. Don't be a part of the problem. We don't need allies anymore from our white friends our brothers and sisters who may be watching, or whoever, whatever other ethnic group. We all collectively need to work together for a better society. We don't need allies anymore. We need accomplices. We need people to stand next to us and to even call out racism when we see it, before we even say something. I mean, I don't know how much time we have on this planet. I don't know how much more that more things that need to be taught for people to understand. But I know that, one person, because that person was me, have the power to become a freedom conductor in their own way. One pebble thrown into a water could start a ripple effect. Let's make that happen with real life, with what we do on a daily basis as individuals, because it only takes one person to spark that ripple effect. And that's what we need. We need empathy and love for our fellow man. We lost that. We lost that in our humanity.
Indeed. Wetland, I'll yield to you for any closing remarks.
Yeah, this has been just absolutely wonderful. Honestly, cannot thank you enough for your time, your insights, and just your willingness to talk with us. I think I speak for both Stephanie and we are very excited to share this with our teammates, and just to be able to continue the legacy and continue this discussion, because it is so important, especially when we think of things like a Tyree, and we talk about 2020, it's 2023, so and so shouldn't be happening, but it is.
That's right.
And it's because we need to continue to fight. And so I just wanted to know if there's any other projects that you have on the horizon that we should know about, or where people can find the Till movie. I know around me it's not in theaters anymore, so you have to stream it, but yeah.
Well, AMC for February, Black History Month, they're actually screening Till for $5. So I'm not sure if this is showing in your area, but you could check the listings on that. The film is now streaming as well, but I believe that's still a cost with you streaming it. And we just went to DVD.
Okay.
And so you could purchase the DVD. I tell everyone, please go out and purchase the DVD. Buy 2 copies, one for yourself and give the other away.
Yeah.
Right? I say specifically to a young person. And so I hope that that could happen. I'm hoping that would, help as well. So it's doing multiple things at this moment, but Till is the film that's in. So I want people to go out and support Till.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, many thanks to you for sitting with us today to have this very wonderful conversation, much needed and informational conversation. I'm just so grateful to you. Whenever you call Keith, he comes and running. So trust and believe that if we need him and he's available, he's there. And I thank you for having that type of heart and for the passion that you not only held, but that you shared with the world through this project and so many others. We are truly proud of you. We are proud of this very classy and impeccably told story about Mamie Till and her beautiful son, Emmett Till. And I just wanted to say that, this project, I hope you know this project is now vested in our history. It is a story that we can just put on the TV and share with our children, because they like to be, as I say, or many people say, edutained. So we have to entertain them and educate them through entertainment. So thank you so much for sharing all of your journey with us in this complete, impeccably told story, as inspired by the mother, Mamie Till Mobley. We just thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing more from you. And I'm so excited about the Injustice Files. That's going to be something we definitely have to promote. So if that comes to fruition, you've got your biggest fan right here. But thank you so much for this platform.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay. Well, and happy Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month.
Take care, Keith. Okay. Thank you, Wetland.
you.